There was a boy named Joseph who lived with his father Jacob in the land of Canaan. Joseph had 11 brothers, but because he was born when Jacob was old, he was his father's favorite son. Jacob made Joseph a beautiful coat of many colors to show how much he loved him. One day, Joseph had a dream. He couldn't wait to tell his brothers all about it. "Let me tell you about my dream," Joseph said. "We were out in the field tying up bundles of wheat. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles gathered around and bowed down to it." "Do you really think you are going to be king and ruler over us?" his brothers asked. Joseph's brothers hated him because of his dream. Joseph had another dream. "Listen to what else I dreamed," he said to his brothers. "The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me." When Joseph told his father about this dream, his father became angry and said, "Are we all going to bow down to you?" Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept wondering about the dream. One day, when Joseph's brothers had gone to take care of the sheep, his father said to him, "I want you to go to your brothers to see how they and the flocks are doing. Then come back and tell me." "Yes, sir," Joseph answered. Joseph left and found his brothers in Dothan. But before he got there, they saw him coming and made plans to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to one another. "Let's kill him and throw him into a pit and say some wild animal ate him. Then we'll see what happens to those dreams." Reuben wanted to save his brother and bring him back to his father, so he came up with this plan. "Don't take his life," he said. "Throw him into this empty well." Reuben planned to rescue Joseph later. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they pulled off his fancy coat and threw him into the dry well. As the brothers sat down to eat, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants came by. The brothers decided to sell Joseph to the merchants for 20 pieces of silver. "After all," they said, "he is our brother, and this is better than killing him." They pulled Joseph out of the well and sold him to the merchants. Joseph was on his way to Egypt, a long, long way from home. The Ishmaelites sold Joseph to Potiphar, the king's official in charge of the palace guard. Potiphar noticed that the Lord helped Joseph be successful in whatever he did. So Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his house and all of his property. One day, Joseph went to Potiphar's house to do his work, and none of the other servants were there. Potiphar's wife grabbed Joseph and asked him to do something that did not please God. Joseph ran out of the house, leaving Potiphar's wife with his coat in her hands. When Potiphar got home, his wife told him that Joseph tried to attack her. "I screamed for help," she said, "and when he heard me scream, he ran out of the house and left his coat." When Potiphar heard this, he was very angry and ordered Joseph to be put into prison. Though he was sold by his brothers, wrongfully accused by Potiphar's wife and placed in prison, Joseph never stopped doing what was right. It was his dream that caused a lot of problems, but it was also a dream that would save his family and his people. One night, the king of Egypt had a dream. He dreamed he was standing beside the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 fat, healthy cows came up from the river and started eating grass along the bank. Then 7 ugly, skinny cows came up out of the river and ate the fat, healthy cows. The king woke up. The king went back to sleep and had another dream. This time, 7 full heads of grain were growing on a single stalk. Later, 7 other heads of grain appeared, but they were thin and dried up by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 full heads. Again, the king woke up. The next morning, the king was upset and told his magicians and wise men what he had dreamed, but none of them could tell him the meaning of his dreams. The king's personal servant remembered Joseph, who had told him the meaning of one of his dreams while he was in prison. The king sent for Joseph. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, Joseph went to see the king. When the king told Joseph what he had dreamed, Joseph said, "Your Majesty, God has revealed what he intends to do. For 7 years, Egypt will have more than enough grain, but that will be followed by 7 years where there won't be enough. The famine will be so bad that no one will remember that once there had been plenty." Joseph then suggested that the king find someone who was wise and knew what to do to oversee a plan to collect and store grain for the next 7 years. The king told Joseph, "God is the one who has shown you these things. No one else is as wise as you are and knows as much as you do. I am putting you in charge of my palace, and everyone will have to obey you. No one will be over you except me. You are now governor of all Egypt." Just as God had shown Joseph, there were 7 years of plenty. After those years, a famine came upon the land. Not everyone was ready for the famine. When Jacob, Joseph's father, heard that there was plenty of grain in Egypt, he sent his sons to buy food for the family. Since Joseph was in charge of selling grain, his brothers came to him and bowed before him. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph accused them of being spies. He asked questions about their father and the family. He told them that to prove their honesty, they would have to leave one brother in Egypt and bring their younger brother, Benjamin, to him. Joseph did this because he wanted to see his younger brother. Joseph also did other things to test his brothers. When the brothers returned to their father, they told him what the governor of Egypt asked them to do. Jacob did not want to send his youngest son. He was afraid something bad might happen to him. "I already have one dead son," he said. He still believed the story his sons told him about Joseph. They told him that he had been eaten by a wild animal. Jacob finally agreed to let Benjamin go to Egypt. When Joseph saw him, he had to run to his room to hide the tears of joy. He invited his brothers to dinner at his house. He sat Benjamin close to him and gave him 5 times the amount of food he gave the others. Joseph saw that his brothers no longer became jealous when one brother was treated better than the others. Joseph finally broke down and told them that he was their brother. They did not believe him at first. Then he said, "Yes, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Don't worry or blame yourselves for what you did. God is the one who sent me ahead of you to save lives." Joseph forgave his brothers for all they had done. The king was happy to hear that Joseph's brothers had come to Egypt. He told them to go back to Canaan and bring their father and all of their family to live in Egypt. He gave them the best land, and they had all they needed during the famine. The dream came true. God's plan for Joseph was to make him a ruler so he could save lives. God has a plan for you. So no matter what happens in your life, remember that God is in control and all things work out for good if you love God and do what's right.